Hey, physiology students, welcome to the last lecture on the endocrinology chapter. Okay, so let's share the screen and get the last little bit done. All right, so last time we left off with, I believe, talking about the gonads. What a great place to end. But today we're going to talk about uh, the pineal gland. Okay, so the pineal gland is found in the diencephalon. In fact, it's at the back of the thalamus right here, just a teeny tiny gland right there. Well, the pineal gland makes melatonin, and melatonin is secreted at night, and it is what helps set your circadian rhythm or your sense of day and night. All right. Some people take melatonin as a sleep aid because, well, that's what's being secreted at night. Now, um, if you've ever traveled outside of your time zone, gone to some place that's 3 or 6 hours before or ahead of your time, your circadian rhythm has been set. And when you travel out of your time zone, the people you're visiting, they might be wide awake, but for you, it's 7 o'clock at night for them. For you, it feels like 10 o'clock at night and you're ready to go to bed. That's because this melatonin secretion for weeks and weeks and weeks has set your circadian rhythm to your time zone. Okay, moving on. The pancreas. The pancreas, that glandular structure that lies just beneath the stomach, which is not shown here, but basically on the left upper quadrant, okay, of your abdomen. Now, the pancreas does many things, and it has two endocrine functions. And both of those functions are to regulate your blood glucose levels. So your pancreas makes insulin and glucagon. And back in chapter 1, we talked about when the pancreas secretes those hormones. So if your blood glucose is high, like you just consumed food or a sugary beverage, your pancreas will sense that blood glucose has risen and it will secrete insulin. And insulin will encourage your body cells to take in glucose from the bloodstream and thus it lowers it. Okay. Now, if your blood glucose is too low, the pancreas senses it and it secretes glucagon. Glucagon tells the liver, that's why this is shown here, to break down its glycogen stores. Glycogen is a storage form of glucose. So when the liver gets the signal of glucagon, it will break down that glycogen into glucose and spill that glucose out into the bloodstream. And that makes blood glucose come up. So most people know that insulin is involved in blood glucose regulation, but and that's from the pancreas. But most people fail to realize or know that the liver is as important as the pancreas in regulating blood glucose. But it is the pancreas that secretes the hormones to do so. Okay, now there's a clinical app on diabetes mellitus or mellitus, I pronounce it mellitus, that you can read if you're one of my students looking at the PowerPoint online. But we're going to go ahead to the liver. Now, the liver, as does the kidneys, secretes erythropoietin. And the word erythro means red. Okay, so erythropoietin is a hormone that stimulates red blood cell production in your bone marrow. So the stimulus for the liver to secrete this is when your blood oxygen concentration drops below a certain minimum threshold, and or if you've lost red blood cells, like you're anemic, and the liver will secrete this hormone, and your bone marrow will start producing new red blood cells. In about 2 weeks' time, those mature red blood cells will be in the bloodstream. Okay, moving on. Um, so this last little note here is that the liver is as involved as the pancreas in regulating blood glucose. Okay, the GI tract. This is the last of the endocrine system. So the GI tract has basically 4 known hormones. The first one is produced by the stomach and it's called gastrin. And this makes sense because the stomach is referred to as gastric. Now, gastrin, the hormone, stimulates hydrochloric acid production by the stomach's parietal cells. The parietal cells are the proton pumps, and they pump out protons, which create acid. And that's why hydrochloric acid as the hydro for hydrogen. Okay, so that's responsible for acid production in the stomach. Here's a nursing application of this. Sometimes in some people, the stomach produces too much acid because those parietal cells are overactive. And what happens is that acid can back up from the stomach through the sphincter, the cardiac sphincter here, into the esophagus. Now, that reflux is referred to as gastroesophageal reflux disease. Some people just call it gastric reflux. Now, that is actually bad because unlike the stomach that produces a lot of mucus to protect itself from the acid that's produced there, the esophagus doesn't have that much mucus, and that hydrochloric acid left untreated could erode away a hole into the esophagus. So there is a pharmaceutical drug out there that's supposed to decrease the activity of parietal cells and reduce acid production. That's called Nexium, referred to as the purple pill. What that pill does is it slows down the hydrogen pumps in your stomach. Okay, let's move on. So, once chyme, which is food and liquid mixed with mucus and acid in the stomach, moves out of the stomach through the pyloric sphincter, it moves into the first part of the small intestine. Right here, looks like a little pouch. That's called the duodenum. So that's receiving an acidified bolus of chyme from the stomach. So just like the esophagus doesn't have enough mucus to protect it from acid, neither does the duodenum or any part of your small intestine. So the small intestine, the duodenum, secretes secretin. And that stimulates water and bicarbonate secretions from the pancreas. So if you remember, the pancreas is pretty much underneath the stomach. It's not shown here, but it is right underneath the stomach, and the pancreas has a duct that communicates with the duodenum of the small intestine. So as soon as food and liquid from the stomach enters the small intestine, the duodenum secretes secretin to tell the pancreas, hey, I've got an acidic mass here. I need some bicarbonate. And bicarbonate is a buffer. It will neutralize the acid so that the acid doesn't damage the intestine. Okay. Next hormone, long one, cholecystokinin. The duodenum also secretes this hormone. And what it does is, so the liver would be right about here, okay? Just to the right of the stomach. Now, the liver produces bile. Bile is made from cholesterol salts. Bile is trickled down from the liver through a duct into a gallbladder, which is a sac that contains a bunch of bile. Then there is a duct from that gallbladder that connects to the duodenum of the small intestine. So as soon as food and liquid enters the duodenum of the small intestine, especially if that food contained a lot of fats, cholecystokinin stimulates from, it's being secreted by the duodenum, it stimulates the gallbladder to contract and release that bile into the duodenum. So it starts breaking down fat. All right. So the word cholecystokinin, chole is from cholesterol, which bile is made of. And this hormone stimulates the gallbladder. So they're all tied together name-wise. Okay, this hormone, cholecystokinin, also stimulates the pancreas to release digestive enzymes into the duodenum. So the duodenum is receiving a bunch of stuff. So this part of the small intestine gets chyme with acid from the stomach. It then stimulates secretin to make bicarbonate secretion from the pancreas enter the duodenum and neutralize that acid. Cholecystokinin secreted by the duodenum makes the gallbladder dump its contents into the duodenum, and it also stimulates the pancreas to dump its enzymes into the duodenum. So in the duodenum, it's the first place of the small intestine that nutrient absorption, breakdown of food, and nutrient absorption is beginning to occur. And that means when stuff is broken down enzymatically, the small molecules are absorbed throughout the rest of the small intestine into the bloodstream. Okay, last hormone, gastric inhibitory peptide. What this hormone does, and it's secreted by the small intestine, is it slows stomach or gastric motility to aid in digestion. It's like, don't rush stomach. Make sure you mix all that food with acid and start breaking it down mechanically, because the stomach has 3 layers of muscle that help in breaking down large chunks of food into small pieces of food. This hormone also stimulates the pancreas to release insulin proactively, because once substances, food, enters the small intestine, it is soon going to be digested and nutrients are going to be pulled into the bloodstream. So this is giving the pancreas kind of a heads up, like some food is going to be hitting the bloodstream. Secrete insulin. Okay, so you made it through endocrine physiology. Congratulations. All right, we're done.